Hey, Guru.
I've been thinking about how siloed modern medicine is. You want to go to a doctor, you first have to think about, is that the right doctor for the specific organ? Like if you have a stomach pain, you go to the stomach doctor. If you have a heart issue, you go to the heart doctor. It's like as an IT, a computer guy, if I look at the internet and if my internet is broken, it's sort of like looking at one laptop and trying to figure out what's going on in the whole internet, whereas the internet is really a whole connected network of many things. The doctors never think like that.
Yep, yep. Well, that's because that's how they've been trained. So when you say modern medicine, I would call it a conventional medicine, and
Yeah.
that's how they've been trained. That's what they do. But today we're going to introduce a new concept, which is not new at all. It's actually 40 years old, but we are going to focus today and explain in deep depths the concept of functional medicine. So functional medicine is a personalized. So we're going to now stack up a bunch of different features of functional medicine that both overlap and are distinct from conventional medicine. So functional medicine is personalized. It is systems-based approach to chronic disease. It views the body not as a collection of isolated organs, like what you said, but as a network of interacting systems. So that if something is wrong with the heart, you don't just look at the heart, you look at the whole body. So functional medicine not only includes conventional diagnosis and treatment. So functional medicine is not alternative medicine. It does not exclude conventional medicine. It actually includes all of the conventional medicine, diagnostic tests, treatments, and so on. But in addition, it also asks how a person's genetics, environment, nutrition, sleep, stress, medications, microbiome, and all other factors may be contributing to this illness, and how those factors can be changed towards cure of that disease, right? So put
Yeah.
simply, it asks not only what condition does this person have, but also why did it develop in this particular person and what can we do about it?
Yeah, right. Agreed. Functional medicine is a very holistic approach. It looks at all the interconnections across the different organisms, I mean, organs in an organism. And when I think about some of the key aspects of those interconnections, you think about the circulatory system, the immune system, the nervous system, right? These are all like interconnected pieces. Like, the heart is not on its own, that it reacts to the immune system aspects. It reacts to what's going on in your gut, in your mouth, and so on, to the microbiome and all of the other signals that it gets from different parts of the body and so forth. It seems to me that it's so important to take all of this network effects into account in medicine. And that's basically what our guest today has figured out. Dr. Jeff Bland was one of the founding fathers of this approach called functional medicine. And he introduced or reintroduced that topic, even though it may have been around before him. He took it to the next level along with Susan Bland and created a functional medicine institute in 1981 and started a whole movement around it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, this is super exciting for us because, as the audience knows, Viome is all about functional medicine and understanding the root causes. And I'd like to also, in this intro, give a couple of examples of this network effect because that may sound a little abstract. When people say, I have high blood pressure, well, I'm going to go to a cardiologist and I'm going to get a high blood pressure medication, right? And that's conventional medicine. But but check this out. The network effect is blood pressure is regulated genetically by our human genes at birth, and starting at birth, those genes function perfectly fine. But every decade, our genes lose about 10% of their ability to control blood pressure. So by the time we're 50, half of the blood pressure regulation now falls onto our microbiome. And so if the microbiome is faulty, you're going to have high blood pressure. And here's where this network effect kicks in big time as we age. So with the blood pressure, we need to consume molecules called nitrates, and these nitrates are actually absorbed in the gut into the bloodstream. They circulate via the bloodstream and go to the salivary glands. Salivary glands are genetically encoded to concentrate those nitrates and put them inside saliva to feed specific oral microorganisms, those nitrates, and then those microorganisms convert them into nitrites, which we swallow, and nitrites hit the stomach, and the acid in the stomach converts them to nitric oxide, sorry. And nitric oxide is the molecule that lowers the blood pressure. So now you have a very complex network of specific nutrition, specific mechanism of absorption of nitrate in the gut, and then conversion to specific molecules by oral microorganisms, and then you have to have stomach acid. So for example, if you've used mouthwash and killed those microbes in the oral cavity, that chain breaks, that network breaks. If you are taking antacids like PPIs and you don't have stomach acid, that chain breaks. If you don't have the right gut microbiome and your absorption is horrible, you may not be processing or absorbing those nitrates correctly. So that's the network effect. And so, yeah, conventional medicine may give you a medication that may or may not work, but functional medicine would look to fix the actual root cause so that you can have normal blood pressure with no medications, and then that's a better approach.
Agreed, Momo. And this also needs emphasis from the Viome perspective as well. When we look at systems biology, when we look at our leading tests like the full body intelligence and the precision health pro test, this is the underlying philosophy behind these tests, which is that
Exactly.
you are looking at all of the different elements of your body. You're looking at the gut microbiome, you're looking at the oral microbiome, you're looking at the blood transcriptome, and then you're connecting the dots across the activities, the dynamic biology that we are able to detect in each one of these different parts of the body. And as a result of all of that, you're able to get a much better insight into what your health status is today and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
So with that, I think it would be great to talk to Dr. Bland and discuss this whole topic and approach of functional medicine. I'm really excited about it.
Super excited. Thank you, Guru. I'm Momo, a biochemist.
And I'm Guru, an AI and data scientist.
We're two PhDs on a pod.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Next step. Momo, what's on your radar?
Okay, so for today, I would like to just give people sort of like a hint of what's coming up at Viome, because we've actually licensed a technology for detecting early stages of pancreatic cancer, and we have now been working in our own laboratory for the last few months to successfully actually overcome all the barriers of translating an academically developed test into a commercial laboratory developed test. And now I can say, hey, we're gonna do this. And so that's a really, really exciting step, because
Very
pancreatic
exciting.
cancer is one of the deadliest cancers. So consider this sort of like when a company reveals a new car and they're just showing you sort of the highlights of the little curves and everything else is black, and you're like, whoa, that looks exciting, but I want to see more. So more to come in the next 2 months, because we're planning to go to market in October. So that's just over a month from now. So that's
Absolutely
exciting. And then I have a couple of Oh, go ahead, Guru.
No, I was just going to say, on the pancreatic cancer test, it's so important that we are able to detect it early, right? If we don't detect it early, there's not a whole lot you can do, because mortality increases quite a bit when you go to the later stage. But if you detect it early, there's probably treatments that will reduce mortality, and that is our goal. This test that we are developing is going to be very good, high sensitivity at stage 1, which is the most important element of early detection cancer
Yep.
tests.
Yep. All right, let's go into some foods. I always like to talk about foods because I'm just in love with cooking and food. So yeah, I got a couple of pictures. So, well, for mushroom lovers, I mean, how exciting is it that you don't have to go spend days foraging the forests to look for some mushrooms? I've done that many, 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 many times in my life, and I enjoy it, but it's not practical to do that all the time. how awesome is it that you can go to a local H Mart, which is my favorite mushroom store, and just load up on all kinds. I just walk down the aisle of the mushrooms and I pick up 7 or 8 different types, like you can see here in the picture. And then I wash them, chop them up, and make these mixtures. And so every time, and I put them in the freezer in these silicone Ziploc bags. And so whenever I want mushrooms, I just pull out a Ziploc bag, this silicone one, and it's got a mixture of these 7 mushrooms or 8 mushrooms, and it's just delicious in all kinds of meals. It's just so good. And so and they're so healthy. Mushrooms are so healthy and tasty, and they have great texture. I just love it that we have access to that. That's one of the great improvements in quality of life in modern food chains. So really excited about that.
Yeah,
And
Momo,
then
let
next,
let me add something there. It turns out it's an interesting story about my own personal journey with mushrooms. Um, I was not a big fan of mushrooms because it's just not part of the South Indian sort of cooking style.
right.
But not too long ago, I got a result from our Viome test, which says, "Hey, man, you got to increase your mushroom intake because all of these mushrooms are your superfoods."
Yep.
And then
Yep.
I did a lot of deep diving into that, and I saw that the kinds of fibers, the inulins, for example, right?
Yep.
Those fibers are super good for my particular health.
And
And
beta
so
glucans.
and the glucans, exactly.
Yes.
So I looked at all of these things, and now I've kind of switched my mindset. I look for mushrooms all the time. When I go to a restaurant and I have a choice between a mushroom dish and a non-mushroom dish, I pick the mushroom dish, and so on and so forth. So it's actually now become a big part of my thinking as well. So this picture is now very interesting to me. It didn't used to be 10 years ago, but now it is.
Yeah. The Viome results change you, but you also are married to a Slav, which I would have thought that you would have gotten introductions to mushrooms
I
because
did.
that's
I
big.
did.
That's a big part of the culture.
She tried, but I was resisting it until about a few years ago when I got the
I
Viome test. So
see. Okay.
it's actually changed my behavior in significant ways. So that's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing. More people need to do that.
Yeah.
Change behavior based on their personalized biology. All right, next slide, please. Okay, here I wanted to show you something that I make that is super, super simple. It's a dish that's super simple. So I think people have heard of rice and beans as sort of a very, very traditional Native American dish. It's very high in protein, high in fiber, high in polyphenols, like all kinds of good things. But there are going to be people who are going to criticize it and say, well, yeah, there's some protein in there, but really you need to add meat in order to make it, high enough protein. And that turns out not to be the case. And so here's an example of a dish that has very high protein. It has more than 30 grams of protein in this one serving. And so all I've done is I have a bed of rice and I have a bed of beans. But then inside those beans, I added chunks of super firm tofu. This is just a standard super firm tofu you can get anywhere. We get it at Trader Joe's, but you can get it anywhere. And so if you look at the nutritional information on the tofu and the beans, you can actually figure out how much tofu to add in there, and you can actually cook it with the beans. While you're cooking the beans, you can cook the tofu when you're refrying the beans, and that way, or just frying them with spices, and that way you can have a delicious meal with 30 grams of protein, with all the benefits of tofu and beans. And then you can garnish that with what I did here, long green beans to add a bunch of fiber. And so this is like a completely vegan meal that is super nutritious. And depending on how you spice it, which of course you should spice it with chile, some form of chile. We use chorizo seasoning because we make that stuff by kilograms in our household. And so this is just loaded with chile, and it's just delicious and nutritious. So, try to get creative beyond just what people talk about, and this is one example that I wanted to share.
And I have also very similar approaches to cooking and preparing food, and I have many examples of such dishes. I'll bring some for the future episodes.
Awesome. All
Thank
right,
you,
Guru,
Momo.
what's on your radar?
All right, couple of interesting things on my radar. The first thing I wanted to highlight, because we're talking about foods, is something that's become a little bit of a tradition in our office. It's called the microbiome gathering, which we do on every Wednesday when we have our lunch and learn meeting. Just before that, our team has figured out how to grow some really interesting greens in our hydroponic garden in the office, which you see on the right hand side. So we got lots of different types of lettuces, we got lots of different types of herbs, and we pick some of those things and we juice it in the office along with other kinds of vegetables and fruits, like this example from I think a week or two ago. There's actually a bunch of, you can guess, watermelons, but also some cucumbers and a bunch of leaves that we had picked up from the garden. And you see the nice mint garnish on top. It's an amazing, my mouth waters every time I see this again. Like, it's an amazing little shot that we take just before our lunch and learn meeting every Wednesday. And we do this in this office. So we are very proud of it. And our team is becoming extremely good at making different combinations of these microbiome shots, which I think is going to be filled with all types of micronutrients and all types of other really great microbiome enhancing compounds. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight.
That looks awesome. Let's just clarify that when you say interesting greens, that no illegal stuff at the federal level falls into the interesting.
No, look at all the greens we have on the right hand side.
It's just the naive stuff, but your basil and your mint and your
different types of lettuces, kale, and et cetera, et cetera. You see all the greens on the right hand side.
Nice, amazing.
Really
that
cool
looks
stuff.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
look at all those colors. Wow.
Yeah, we are so happy with this garden. The second thing I wanted to highlight was, Momo, you and I just celebrated our birthdays. So happy birthday again.
Happy birthday.
And for my birthday this year, we went to this area around where we live in upstate New York called Lake George. It's in the Adirondacks region. Very, very impressive area. This lake, by the way, is like 32 miles long. It's a huge lake. I think it's called the Queen of American Lakes or something like that.
Ooh.
And it's got all of these ecological environments that have been studied by a number of scientists, and they have experimental setups across the lake. Just going from the southern tip where it's called the Lake George Village, all the way to the northern end of it will take you many hours by even fast boats, because it's just a long, very long lake and lots of different environments and stuff. So we were hanging around this whole area. We had a boat with us, and we were riding around and boating around, but also we were hiking around, because the Adirondacks are very nice, not very high, but really nice mountains.
Really nice.
And there are beautiful beaches, fresh water. And you can, it's warm water, and you can see all the, beautiful, environment around you all the time. And so we enjoyed this a lot. So if people haven't been around this area, I would highly recommend it. This is where I spend my birthday weekend. And the last thing I want to mention.
Well, just a second. I mean, this is quite different from New York City, of course, but it's not that far from New York City. How far is the drive?
It's so I live just north of New York City, and from our house to this place is approximately 3.5 hours.
Yeah, so you can make that into a weekend trip fairly easily.
It's a weekend trip. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
There's a lot of people from the New York City environment who come up here, but this area has become a magnet for all the nature lovers and environmental lovers and scientists even, who are doing all kinds of different work. So yes, highly recommend.
Looks great. You look great, man.
Thank you, man. So the other thing I started doing after my birthday, Momo, is, as you know, you and I both love table tennis or ping pong, right? And it's been, I would say, maybe a year or so since I went back to table tennis seriously. So just this last week, I decided that I'm going to get back into it. I went to a table tennis tournament, which I always do when I'm in good shape. So I just won in our ping pong club. I just won the silver in a under 1150 rated USATT tournament. and I'm super proud of it. I'm like very sore. All my muscles are super sore because I played like 20 games in highly intense sort of competitive
Wow.
environment. And this guy is a French guy who was super good. He won the gold. I got the silver, but he was like amazing. But I learned a lot. As always, had a lot of fun meeting all the people, playing with people, and all of that stuff. And I love this sport. And
I
I
know.
always try to be on the competitive side just because it motivates me to do better.
Well, congratulations first, but also, yeah, I mean, so fun and it's so weather independent, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, doesn't matter anything. You can count on playing it and it's so creative. There are just infinite number of ways to play it and it's pretty good exercise.
Oh, great
I'd
exercise.
say it's
Yeah.
zone 2 for sure. So,
No, I go up to zone. I mean, this tournament, I checked. I went up to zone 4, Momo. It gets
wow.
really, really intense. I go up to zone 4. Zone 3 is pretty normal in these tournaments, but this time I went up to zone 4 because I was
Okay.
like, I
Yeah.
had to try my very best.
You
So
guys are pretty
yeah,
intense.
it's
Amazing.
really cool. Anyway,
Amazing sport. Yeah. I mean, I encourage everyone to try it and see how they like it. Pickleball seems to be now taking over the world, but pickleball requires an outdoor court or a court and booking and all that stuff. It just requires more space and more planning, and it is mostly weather dependent, whereas ping pong isn't. So, all
exactly.
right,
All right,
great.
are we ready for Dr. Bland?
We are ready for Dr. Bland.
All
Let's
right, let's
go.
bring him on.
Well, here we are. Our special guest for today is Dr. Jeff Bland, a biochemist, nutritional medicine researcher, and one of the founders of the functional medicine movement. Early in his career, back in the 90s, he co-founded the Institute for Functional Medicine, helping advance the idea that chronic disease should be understood through systems biology and not be organ specific, and it should be intercepted years or decades before the symptoms onset. So welcome, Jeff. We're super excited that you have joined two PhDs on a pod, maybe as a third PhD on a pod today.
There we go. Well, I'm super excited to be the third P in the pod, so thank you.
Sounds cool.
Awesome. So let's start off with some dive right in. So first of all, I'm very jealous that you worked with Linus Pauling. He's one of the most extraordinary humans ever. So I can only imagine the kind of memories you have. We'll probably touch upon some of those questions later on. But let's get started, please, with you were way ahead of your time because even today, I struggle to explain to people what systems biology is and what functional medicine is. And back in 1991, I think, right, you started the Institute for Functional Medicine. That's decades ahead of its time. Please tell us about that and how and sort of briefly the challenges and the excitements about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think my story is probably similar in many respects to the two of your stories because we've decided to walk down our career in a slightly different path, I would imagine, than maybe the standard, usual, and customary. I like to think that my training was usual and customary, but maybe the path that I used to travel with it was a little bit different. And I think the major reason for that, quite honestly, was this 2-year experience that I had with Dr. Pauling and his wife, Eva Helen, on sabbatical. I was a university professor starting in 1970 at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. And I was very fortunate to be invited to come down to the Pauling Institute to take over a research lab, a nutrition research lab in 1981 on my sabbatical year. It turned out to be a sabbatical 2 years. And I was very fortunate that my office was right next to Dr. Pauling's office. So I had a lot of opportunity to interact with him informally as well as, through the Institute activities. I also had quite a bit of interaction with his wife, Eva Helen, prior to her passing away. And the two of them together were formidable forces of nature. They were really remarkable people, not only intelligent, but just very humanistically deep in the way that they saw their work in the world and their roles. And, I was very impressed early on that they kept reinforcing the concept that for them, their work was to try to find ways to reduce human suffering. And that was kind of a watchword for their work. And whether it was free elections in Guatemala or exchange of scientists with Russia at the time, or, working on equality-related issues in Africa, He was involved with Albert Schweitzer and Einstein and pulling together of 60,000 scientists to sign this document they drafted to get nuclear testing, atmospheric testing eliminated. That won him the Nobel Prize in Peace. So all those activities, when I was around him, and of course he was a magnet for people coming from all over the world to visit, and so I had the vicarious opportunity to meet not only all these scientists, but authors and artists and political pundits and people that were from all sorts of different disciplines that were, in their own rights, really extraordinary. So when I left there, and I had my box of things in my hands from my office, and my family was in the car with the engine running, waiting for me to join them to drive back to Washington State to rejoin my academic position. The last thing that he said to me, we had this conversation. He said, "So Jeff, it's a pleasure having you the last couple of years. I hope that we'll have a chance to continue to interact and, collaborate." And I said, "Well, of course we will." And then the last question he asked me, he says, "So just one thing, Jeff, do you think your classroom is big enough?" And so then I got in the car to drive 1,100 miles home with my family with this idea kind of going around in my head. And, it was obviously a not too hidden message that I had to be reflecting on what I was going to go back to teach my students and have my classroom and my research projects in my comfort zone. And maybe he was suggesting I needed my comfort zone to be expanded. So
Yeah.
that led me to do, when I think back now, as a young man with a family and a mortgage and all, was kind of crazy. By the time I got home, I'd made the decision to give up my faculty position to give up my tenure. I was actually the highest endowed professor in research monies. So I gave all that up to decide to put together a group that would teach physicians how to do systems biology in their practices.
Oh
Now,
my goodness.
that was my whole business plan. Uh, Literally. I mean, when I say this now, I even wonder about my stupidity. But I think the bottom line is I was guided by this energy that I had gotten from being there with the Paulings and recognizing I was, what was that? I was 40 years, I'm just turned 80, so I was 40 years of age at the time. And maybe this was the time. If I'm going to do something different, I should do it now. So that's kind of the start of this
So,
next trend.
Jeff, I mean,
Amazing.
that's an amazing story. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. And so now I want to ask you, 40 years later, where functional medicine is, what do you think? Do you think you've really pushed it to the point where you would like it to be? What are the other things that still needs to be done? How do we get it to everybody's health journey, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's like the evolution of ideas. It's always a good news, bad news story because an idea has its own imperative. No one controls an idea. I think once you put an idea into the universe, it will find its own way if it has any merit. And so it gets picked up by people and it gets permuted and modified and matured, but it can also be perverted too. All ideas can be perverted.
Yep.
And so I think that functional medicine as a term now became a gathering term. I don't know actually the full reasons for that, the sociological reasons, but it's become kind of a safe place, like a safe harbor for lots of different people to say, oh yeah, I'm in functional medicine. Now, a lot of those people are very highly disciplined, well-educated, very dedicated, are the people that are carrying forward this model and evolving it. And then there are other people that I would call are more parasitic. They're opportunistic. They're using the term because it moves them along in their ability to be either seen as important or make a better living, and they don't really care if they've done any heavy lifting or they really contribute to the body politics. It's all about take, not much give. And I think the evolution of ideas depends upon giving as well as taking. You can't just, take out of the bank account. You got to give back. So I think the answer to your question is that there are individuals. Well, let me put it another way. When I started functional medicine, having been an academic, I was told by my colleagues in the medical education universe, that my ideas were very idealistic and would never become scalable because you'll never get doctors to go back and open books that they didn't really like studying the first time. Biochemistry, cell physiology, histopathology, and so forth and so on, that they just wanted to get through those courses so they could, become doctors. And what I was going to ask them to do indirectly is, no, we're going to go back and we're going to restudy this from a different lens. But, and so they said, Jeff, you're being very idealistic. You might feed a few weirdos out there, but you'll never get a large enough body to scale this. Well, I think I've proven that wrong. I think over the years that we have found that writ large, in medicine, there are many people that are very interested in going back and relearning if they can see a reason for it, if it makes them better able to do their work, to serve their patients better, that they find solutions to problems that they were not able to have before. If you provide a value system for them, they will work very hard. They're used to working hard. And what they don't want to do is waste their time. So I think that what we've done over the years, now it's, 35 years, we've built out an architecture that people can see the reason for engaging in this relearning process, and they see the value proposition of what it gives them in terms of increased skills to deliver services to these complex chronic illnesses that constitute over 70% of our medical expenses right now. The other side of the coin, however, that's the light side of the coin. The other side are the people who are just opportunistically trying to harness whatever they can get out of the affiliation to the movement to their own advantage, and they're perverting it. They're not doing the heavy lifting. They're not really understanding what they're talking about. They're skimming their voice boxes. They're, influencers without substance. And those are the dynamic tensions. Which one is going to win? Is it the one that is built on authenticity and staying power and built to last? Or is it the group that is just taking without giving back and it's opportunistic? So I think right now, I would say the jury's still out. Although functional medicine, as I would envision it, is as a systems biology operating system. And that's what I say. It's not a form. People say, give me the therapies. Well, functional medicine isn't a collection of therapies. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of addressing complexity using the ability to pull together multiple bodies of information. And that's not the kind of thinking that a lot of people were taught. I recall when I was in medical school, it was so much memorization. The people that could really memorize and recite on demand were the ones that were going to get pushed ahead. It didn't really warrant or didn't reward inductive or deductive reasoning. That was, that's kind of no. Just learn the stuff and recite it correctly. So I think that where we are right now in the whole evolution of medicine, and now with the interposition of AI, which adds a whole new element of flux into the system.
And we would like to talk about that a little bit later in this conversation. But Jeff, I have to ask you a follow-up question here, because I have two people in my circle, one of whom is just starting medical school here in the New York City area, and the other one is starting her residency at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center like this month or next month. If you were to meet young people like that who are just starting off their career in medicine, how would you explain and motivate them to get into functional medicine?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. So my answer to that is an answer that a lot of people kind of scratch their heads, say, really, you would say that, Jeff? But my answer is, this educational system that we're provided in the first 2 years of medical school, this basic sciences curriculum, where there is a lot of memorization, it's not just rote learning for no value. The anatomy, physiology, cytology, histology, pathology, those are all really valuable tools to understand. Even if you're never going to be one of those specialists, the fabric of understanding you have that builds out of the architecture of knowledge around the human body is irreplaceable. I mean, it's really important stuff to have. Now, where you take it from there, that's the real question. And so then you go into your clinical years, your third and fourth year, and maybe your residency and internship, and now you get, unfortunately, confronted with the didactic of the system that's all focused on disease. And so the people that are rewarded are going to be the people that are the best diagnosticians. And even in TV and on media, you see that that's what they call the really smart doctors, the really great diagnosticians. Well, diagnosing a disease does not necessarily mean you understand its etiology or where it's come from. But it may lead you in a therapeutic to treat the symptoms, but it may not actually lead you to understand how to treat the cause. So I think there is where the real issue starts to come. If you got a really good grounding in the first 2 or 3 years, now you need to keep your slit width open of your learning curve to say, what on the edges do I also need to be aware of beyond that of just driving for an ICD code that I can prescribe a name to that condition? That's kind of my suggested path. And my case in medical school, just to honest up, was I was very young when I went to medical school, probably too young in terms of social maturity, and I was always questioning. I was kind of a heretic as a young person, and I think I really frustrated a lot of the medical school professors saying, you'll have a lifetime to ask questions. Right now, just learn what you're supposed to learn. And so I think that there is kind of a balance between the insatiable thirst to know more, but also making sure you learn what you need to know so you can take that next step that you're going to decide in your life.
Got it.
I would say that just to comment on your previous description of the functional medicine community, Viome is definitely working 24/7 at a maximum power to add value to the functional medicine community. So we're very proud of that. And second comment I'd like to make is that I'm not sure that it's super important for doctors to choose functional medicine over traditional medicine. I think combining the two is great. And I think that many doctors today are choosing to leave the traditional medicine where the goal is to diagnose and then treat with traditional approaches. They're leaving those positions and starting their own private clinics and joining concierge clinics and giving themselves more flexibility. And in that case, functional medicine knowledge and approaches are going to be making a huge difference in how they're able to help people. So I think that's all options are on the table.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, at our most recent Institute for Functional Medicine annual meeting, that was in San Diego just a couple of months ago, of the 12 or 1,300 practitioners that were there, I think it was 60, let's say more than 50%. More than 50% of them were first timers, and most of them were coming from very traditional medical institutional engagements. So they weren't out there trying to seek out how to be, alternative healthcare providers. They were trying to say, how do I augment my skills to manage these complex chronic conditions that the tools that I've had don't seem to be sufficient to give answers to my patients.
Great. Okay, so next topic is medicine still largely treats people according to population averages. I think that's probably a correct statement, but we'd like your comment on that. And what does it actually mean to practice medicine for the individual?
Oh boy, those are two really good questions. If in a deep dive, we'd have to go to the core of the earth. Yes. But let's start. So I go back to asking a question: how would medicine start? Let's say that we're way back when, pre-Greek, pre-Egyptian, pre-traditional Chinese medicine. How would medicine start? And it would start by people observing certain things in individuals that were associated with them not being totally functional. So it could be a limp. It could be bleeding. It could be a lump. It could be any number of behavior issues that made them unusual.
Sweet urine.
Yes, that's a great example. That's a really, being a clinical biochemist back at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, tasting urine is not my desire. So the concept then is medicine starts kind of as a triage by the most observable things that are easily able to be recognized that are probably very serious. And then it goes from there to say, okay, then how do we go a little earlier in understanding what are the presaging events that lead that person? If it's an accident, maybe we get into accident prevention and falls and things like that. But if it's other like bumps in the body, like it could be in oncology related to event, then we start to try to explore in greater detail, where did that come from? That leads then into the next tier of medicine, which is really, I believe, the tier that we've been in for 100 years, which is the diagnostic tier. And as we went through the International Code of Classification of Disease, ICD 8, 9, 10, and now into 11, we got more and more ways of dicing and slicing individual signs and symptoms into these coding things that we call diseases. So now we have, I don't remember the number, but I think it's over 35,000 different ICD-11 codes. And so now we have this second tier of medicine, but then none of those, well, no, that's an exaggeration. The majority of them really dealt with the outcome that we call the disease. They didn't deal with the path that led to the disease. So now we started saying, well, what are the major dominant conditions we have today? Do they fall very nicely into these clean diagnostic codes, like chronic fatigue syndrome, or like post-myalgic syndrome, or long COVID, or post-CMV infection, or EBV, or the list goes on, environmental toxicity, desert storm? Do they fall into nice, tidy ICD classifications? And the answer is no, they don't. So then we scratch our head and said, well, hold on, then this second system we have doesn't seem sufficient to meet all the needs. And then we say, well, how big is this issue that I'm describing? Is it big enough to warrant us having an expanded view of medicine beyond that of the phase 1, which is the triage 1, and the battlefield concern, and phase 2, the diagnostic concern? And my answer is, well, these conditions constitute maybe as much as 70% of healthcare expenditures.
Yep.
Oh, geez, that's pretty big. That's actually $3.1 trillion of expense annually. Wow.
Yep.
That should get our attention, shouldn't it? But the system we have doesn't address that well. So there's the third tier. That's the tier we're talking about, which is a presaging trajectory towards these conditions that's rooted somehow in a complex distortion of systems biology. And you need different tools and different interrogation to get different answers. You can't keep asking the same questions with the same tools or different questions with the same tools and expect to get different answers. Yeah. So that's why I think what you do at Viome is so important, because it's pioneering a different lens to interrogate at a different level to get a different set of answers to the dominant questions that we have today.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I have a super important question that I think is going to be important to the audience. So, functional medicine as a field is sometimes criticized for getting ahead of the evidence, meaning the evidence is not like super strong, phase 3 clinical trials, yada, 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 right? So, given that, can you give an example? Do you have like a favorite example where a patient went to the traditional route and was either not diagnosed or misdiagnosed or mistreated, and then they went to the functional medicine side, and with these sort of not super proven methods, they actually identified what was the root cause and either reversed or treated successfully the patient? Do you have such examples?
Oh, yeah. Hundreds. Yes.
Any favorites that people can understand the power of function? Yeah, go ahead.
Before I give an example, let me give a thought for consideration that will lead to the example. So a question that I've had asked to me, and as you know, I've done a lot of medical education over the years. I've traveled over 6 million miles. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to get feedback from many different disciplines and different individuals in different places around the world. And one of the most common questions / criticisms I've had bears on what you just asked me. And that is the question, I'm going to reframe it kind of to make it simple. Jeff, you're very persuasive in the way you present information. You've got a lot of practice in presenting, and you can be you can tell a good story. But I, as a practitioner, only practice scientific medicine. And the science that you're describing is descriptive and interrogative and interesting, but scientific medicine, as I define it, is placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trials that have proven the efficacy and safety of specific interventions with new-to-nature molecules. So I really can't, other than enjoy your story, I can't really support it because it doesn't fulfill my criteria of scientific medicine. So my response is the following. My response is, so let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, if we're having an intellectual discussion here to try to find truth, let's assume that we start with a basic standard that everything needs to be placebo-controlled, randomized, and clinically proven to the standard that you're describing. So do you ever have a patient in your practice in which you're recommending more than one drug at a time, and you're going to have them on that combination of drugs for some long duration of time?
That has never been tested in an RCT, probably, right?
Well, there's where we're going.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the answer is, well, if they're being truthful, the answer is, of course I do that. And I said, so then can you cite me the placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial that demonstrates that combination of drugs over that period of time leads to safe and effective outcome? And they'll say, well, no, I have individual studies on each of these drugs. I said, no, that's not what I've asked you. I've asked you the therapy that you've chosen, that you call scientifically based, fulfilling your criteria, does it fulfill what you've just said, that you have only done things with your patients that are double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled when you give them, for years, a prescription with multiple medications? And if they're truthful, they'll say, well, no, but I'm supported because it's standards of evidence from my guild, my medical society, or my medical education. I say, oh, good. Well, then let's both agree that we both have a form of non-scientific medicine that we're practicing. The difference is mine is safe.
Okay,
Because the
that's a good
difference
argument.
is we're using molecules of very low toxicity, low binding efficiency, that have the ability to serve as agonists, antagonists, and that's the way the body actually works. The body doesn't work on eating drugs. The body works on bioactive components from food that modulate complex pleiotropic effects across systems that ultimately then control outcome called the phenotype.
Yeah, I think that's a major takeaway from this whole episode, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually I met several doctors who also have a similar perspective on this. Sort of a forced view of evidence-based medicine, where you only do things that are in the Lancet or something like that, and you don't do anything else that other people have tried in other contexts, in other combinations, and so forth. So I want to tie that back into what we do at Viome, just to come back to it for a minute. I think it's very highly connected, is that number one, rather than focus on diseases, we look at the pathways, the biological functional pathways that are in your body, in your gut, in your mouth, in your blood. And then we connect the dots across all of these different parts of your body. So that's the systems view of the world, rather than just an organ view of the world, or a sort of a reductionist view of the world, right? You connect the dots, and then we sort of ask the question, what are the foods that can impact those pathways to take them in the right direction, right? Well before diseases show up. So my question to you is, if we do need to turn some of this personalization, right, which is what we do in Viome, by the way, right? We look at an individual's pathways, and we essentially recommend, I don't want to say prescribe, we recommend foods that are appropriate for those pathways. So when someone takes all the foods that are appropriate for their not optimal pathways, the hypothesis that we have is that they will improve their overall health. And we can also go into individual domains of health. And by the way, Jeff, we have done some randomized clinical trials with this personalized, placebo-controlled regimen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the studies were placebo-controlled randomized clinical trials, but it's with this personalization philosophy. We've done the randomized clinical trials, and we've seen very good positive results. So, do you think? So, my question to you is this. I mean, it's a long-winded question, but I have to give the background for the same doctor that you talked to. If you were to show the randomized clinical trials that we do in Viome for this personalization approach, do you think doctors will accept that?
Well, yes, they will, but I believe it is the context of how we think of trial design these days. Because of the ability we have now with informatic processing that we didn't have before, we can do large data set analysis. It was not able to be done when I was a student or a faculty. So we get into this concept of, are we doing this in bulk? And this goes back to your population-based versus individual-based. Are we measuring the person against themselves? That's the N of one hypothesis, and then collecting N of one data, and then looking at compilation of N of one data to get group data? Or are we looking at group data as a composite of averages around a mean? And that's the way research was originally done, because it was the simplest informatic and statistically to do, is to take these Gaussian curves and to look at however many deviations from standard we want, see if they were symmetric or non-symmetric distribution curves, and then do analysis and come up with a rule of the average. The difference now is that we can take 1,000 or 10,000 N of one experiments, a person against him or herself, and we can then put them through different informatics systems. It's a different way of doing randomized trials, but it gives us much more interrogation about individual cohorts that we can stratify than we had in our original data limited system that we grew up the whole pharma industry around. So I think we're at a fair paradigm shifting period in which the old methods, which were the limitation for making intelligent decisions about the individual, are being replaced now with these new informatic models that allow us to individualize understanding. So yes, Viome is right at the cutting edge, but it's, your data is only good as the way that you've established its specificity. And the way that it's let me give an example of a drug. This could be one of many, many examples probably. But there's a drug that is used now. It's approved to treat fibromyalgia syndrome. And the history of that drug, which I follow very carefully, it's a Pfizer product, which is actually sold quite well. It has limited efficacy, actually, in improvement. If you look at a number needed to treat, you need to treat, something like 60 people to get a very effective outcome. But it's yet approved, and it's not inexpensive. So how does that happen if we're using double-blind randomized control? Because the way the study was done to get its approval was it put a placebo group and a group with fibromyalgia. These both had fibromyalgia. It put them on either the drug or placebo. At first, there was no differential difference between the outcome of the two. They then took the two groups off the placebo or off the drug, and they saw which then had the return to their symptoms more rapidly. And it turned out that the group that was taken off the drug had the return of their symptoms more rapidly. And so they said, this then defines the need for the drug.
Whoa.
Now, see, that's an interesting convoluted way of doing a drug trial, isn't it?
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So, I think that there are many ways of using these methodologies to prove a point.
It's a business argument, really, right?
Yes.
You want to hook somebody to it.
Wow. Okay, I do want to make sure that we cover the question I asked before, though. Jeff, it's really, I think, important for a takeaway for people to understand the power of functional medicine. For you to give us one example, let's say, where a patient basically reached a dead end with traditional medical approach, went to the functional medicine side, and actually found relief.
Yeah. So let me again, as I said, I could create, or I could give you many examples, but one that's recent that I think is a good testimony to the value proposition of this systems approach. So I was asked to speak, actually 2 years in a row. It's kind of surprising, to the annual meeting of the International Rheumatology Society. So these are rheumatologists, basically, dealing with autoimmune diseases. And I was kind of surprised when I was asked to speak the first time, but then to be invited back a second year really surprised me. And I think the reason that I was asked to speak was that I was speaking about the gut microbiome and its connection to autoimmune disease.
Yep.
And they were hearing a little bit about that, particularly from their patients. It wasn't necessarily in their literature, but it was coming from their patients. So they said, well, let's see if we can find someone out there that might be semi-credible that we could bring in to introduce this concept.
Only semi-credible?
Well, it depends on your definition,
Modest
right, of credibility.
Right.
So I went in and gave my spiel, and after the meeting, one of the rheumatologists came up to me and said, "Oh, my word, Jeff, that was really interesting. That was, a story that we need to know more about in rheumatology. I didn't realize there was that much science that was already present because we don't follow that literature. We just kind of follow the Catechism of the Rheumatology Association.
Yeah.
So this was really interesting to hear." And he said, "So, my wife has pretty severe SLE. And we've really had no real success in getting her under control. And I just wonder, do you think she would be a candidate for what you're talking about?" And I said, "Well, I don't know specifically, but I do know that that we've done studies over the years in our clinical research center. At that time, it was in Gig Harbor. We saw over 1,000 patients a year, and we have seen some pretty remarkable positive turnarounds with various autoimmune diseases, including SLE. So
And
the nice
SLE
thing,
is lupus for the audience.
right? Systemic lupus erythematosus. Yeah, thank you. So I think the nice thing about it is there's a common theme here. Every person has to eat something. So when a doctor then asks me, "Am I doing something unusual?" what I say is, "What is your patient eating?" And they would say, "Well, I never asked that question. It didn't seem relevant." And I said, "Well, I think it is relevant, and we'll help you to answer that question because we're going to help you to guide that patient to eat the right things." So if everybody eats, wouldn't you want to control that as a variable? If that variable has impact on the outcome of your very expensive $24,000 a year drug? And they would say, yeah, that makes good sense. So that would be the way I kind of back myself into that conversation. So he then elected to talk to his wife and get her on the program. He then had her talk to some of our clinical people in my research group. So I came back the next year, and this woman who I had met the previous year, who was pretty physically disabled when I saw her, she was not able to, she was on a walker basically. So the next year when I came back, here she was, chipper, bright-eyed, and on no
Wow.
walker, and saying, "This stuff really works." And I said, "Well, it's not 100%, but it really does make a difference in reducing drug need. It improves efficacy and improves performance. And in your case, it obviously led to a remission." She said, "Yeah, I'm pretty much off drugs entirely now."
Amazing.
So let me give you one other one. So after that, I can get on a run on here, so I apologize, but I'll just do one more.
I think this is really super important for
Yeah.
people to understand the power of functional medicine.
Yeah. So the other one, which I actually wrote about in my last book, was a woman who was on the front page of our local newspaper in Tacoma, Washington. And the way she was on the front page was a photograph of only her hands and wrists and hands holding 2 handfuls of medications. And then the byline was, around this remarkably serious autoimmune disease she had, erythromyalgia, and being unable to get treatment of it and how serious these autoimmune conditions could be. She was in her middle 30s, had 3 children, and was, even with that handful of medications, was still disabled. So my colleague, Dr. Jack Kornberg, who is one of our clinical studies directors, he walked into my office with a newspaper and he throws it down on my desk. He says, "This is disgusting." I said, "What do you mean, Jack, disgusting?" He said, "We can help this woman." I said, well, how do you know we've never had an erythromyalgia patient in any of our studies? How do you know? He says, I just know because there's common themes here that connect together for these autoimmune diseases that we could help her. So I'd like to reach out and contact her. And I said, well, there's kind of like a lot of medical legal stuff there that I think we have to be mindful of. And he said, well, how about if I work through her physician? And I said, well, that would be the only way I think probably we would undertake this if she was willing to do it. So to make a long story short, her physician, who is a head rheumatologist actually in the Pacific Northwest, he agreed that this, because it was going to be kind of a diet lifestyle intervention program, we're not taking her away off from drugs or not giving her any other drugs. She started into it. And because my office was right up near the parking lot, I could see people that we had special parking for patients. I could see her parking. And on her first couple of visits, she was helped in by her husband and could barely walk into the office. Literally, she had to be assisted. And over the course of a few months, she would park in the same spot, and I would see her now starting to walk unencumbered into the office. So a year went by, and then she kind of graduated out of the program. By that time, she was on virtually no medications. She was doing incredibly well. And by the way, she had her her request when she started into this. She said, if you can help me achieve the 3 wishes, because we have what we call the magic wand rule. What are the 3 wishes if you had a magic wand that you would like to have resolved? And her 3 magic wand wishes were, 1, that she could sit at the kitchen counter and prepare or stand and make a meal for her family, which she couldn't do. Number 2, that she could go out into her garden in the spring and plant her garden, which she couldn't do. And 3, that she could go to the mall with her kids and go for a walk and get some running shoes, get some walking shoes.
Wow.
Those were her three wishes.
Pretty normal stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty basic stuff, actually. Right?
And she was able to achieve those 3 things within 6 months. She was
Wow.
So then this is the topper of the story. So we didn't see her for several months. So the summer came, and towards the end of the summer, she called to make an appointment because she wanted to just visit us. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So she came back with her husband, and she had a big something wrapped up in paper with a gift card to the doc and our head of nutrition services, in which it was opened. It was a photograph of her at the top of Mount Si, where she had walked, holding a sign saying, "Thank you, Dr. Jack and Deanna."
And Mount Si is a burly hike. That's a serious hike.
It's 2,400 vertical feet of a pretty challenging trail above Seattle. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Super cool. I just want to close this topic up on functional medicine. Is functional medicine mostly or solely relying on nutrition and lifestyle? Does it include any non-natural pharmaceuticals, for example?
Well, I think the way that I and my colleagues define functional medicine, it's to use the best things for the right purpose for the right reason.
Okay.
And so people have asked me, are GLP-1s disallowed in
right
functional medicine? I would say under the appropriate use, maybe GLP-1s are what you need. So, but it's using them appropriately with the right context of what you're actually trying to achieve. It's not just one-stop shopping.
Okay, perfect.
Got it.
Excellent.
So
Guru, your turn now.
My turn. So I think the idea of root cause medicine is very, very interesting and appropriate, especially for the audience of this podcast, because we talk about it all the time. So I've heard you speak about inflammation quite a bit, Jeff. And as you know, I mean, you brought up 2 autoimmune cases, and the immune system is sort of the mediator for sort of chronic inflammation that can be the root cause of many diseases, right? I want to ask you whether there are other such processes in the body that are also potentially underlying many chronic diseases. And please explain to us what they may be if there are others. And then the second question I have follow on is, how do you measure the basic underlying root causes? In your mind, what is the approach you would use to measure these and track these over time?
So the question you asked, the first question is, are there processes that are fundamental to the upstream or root cause of downstream problems?
Yeah.
That was actually the principal question that we asked the founding members of the functional medicine community in 1989, 1990, when we started to actually develop this concept. And so we sat down. I'm very privileged about this because when I threw out the invitation that we could have bi-weekly meetings, I guess, no, hold it, it's be semi-weekly meetings every other week, with a group of individuals that would give their time to this. Now, this is before we had Zoom. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s. So it would require often people, if they couldn't come, they'd get on the telephone, but we'd mostly do it with people, bodies meeting every other week. And the question we asked one another is, based on our understanding of systems biology and cell biology and histopathology and all these different things, what do we think is emerging at the frontier of the root cause? Can we package things into buckets?
Yep.
And we ended up with 7 buckets at that time.
7.
We called the fundamental processes. And I actually talked about that in my book, Disease Delusion, which was more for the consumer to inform them as to what are these 7 fundamental processes. And those are the processes that we took a bet on would be modifiable. You could execute and change them through appropriate intervention. And they were forming a matrix. It's almost like now we see the hallmarks of aging. And we have this list of these different variables that contribute to cell and biological aging. Well, these fundamental physiological processes, one of which was gut function, became then I guess you would call them now the hallmarks of functional medicine. And we developed a whole curriculum around it. And that curriculum is what is our ACCME approved, the American College of Continuing Medical Education approved curriculum that we teach doctors for certification in functional medicine. So we brought up things like detoxification was one of those. Gut immune function was another. Intracellular signaling through modulation through hormones. Bioenergetics through mitochondrial bioenergetic processes. Structural integrity that relates to muscles, integuments, and bone working together. Let's see, what am I missing in my 7? Elimination. That was right. So it's not only intake, but getting rid of things. So
Yep.
We get to the urea cycle and all the various factors that help the body to get rid of stuff. So those 7 core fundamental processes became the teaching tenets that allowed us to explore at root cause the downstream effects that we see as these diseases that end up being called different things. Now, the thing I'm very proud of, now, what is it, 30, well, yeah, I guess 36 years ago when we did this, that we weren't 100% on target. I don't want to overblow it, but we were greater than 80% on target. That group of individuals that sat, and this was multidisciplinary group of people that were from different disciplines. And I think we did a pretty good job of forecasting where the future might take us. And so we haven't had, or the present IFM people, the Institute for Functional Medicine educational people, have not had to modify very much those core physiological processes. Now that the teaching to each one of those has changed because we have much more depth of understanding. So then that leads to your question of how do you assess these?
Yep.
And that is a really fundamental point that I still do not believe is well understood even within the functional medicine community. This is one of my stalking interest points because I still hear people talking about diagnosis. Oh, what are the diagnostic tests that we should be using?
Mhm.
And that is the inappropriate word. Nothing we're talking about here is related to diagnosis. It's related to prognosis. These are prognostic tests.
Mhm.
Yep.
So how do you prognostically evaluate? Because if you're a diagnosis, you're already downstream into a set of histopathology.
Yep.
Those are useful. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not useful.
Mhm.
They are, but that's a level of interrogation that leads to a different set of outcomes
Yep.
than being able to prognose, to understand trajectory, to understand phenomically how that person is performing at what I call the four quadrants of function. And those four quadrants are physical function, metabolic function, cognitive function, and behavioral function. And when you weave those four cohorts together, those four quadrants,
Mhm.
now you have total body function. To understand that, you have to understand prognostic markers, not diagnostic markers.
Yep.
Like the
Beautiful.
difference between a resting EKG and an exercise EKG, or a fasting blood sugar and an oral glucose tolerance test.
Yep.
Two different kinds of information.
So do you feel like for each one of those 7 areas, there are these prognostic markers that are pretty well defined
Absolutely.
right now?
And Viome has been a leader in taking this transcriptomic knowledge base and mapping it against these 7 areas.
Yep.
That's one way of getting to some answers, right?
Actually, that is inspiring me to go back and look at all the pathways that we measure and kind of map it back into your 7 areas. So which I will do, or our team will do, and maybe get back to you about and
Well, that'd be
have
fantastic.
have
I
you
love
kind
that.
of evaluate that and review that, if it makes sense.
No, I would love that.
Yeah.
I think these are the tools that, because even within the functional medicine community, you've seen this. It's like test du jour. Okay, well, let's see, what's the latest test that I might put on my patients to get them to be able to diagnose their chronic illness?
Right.
That whole formalism is wrong for me.
Okay. Yeah. So we want
From a functional
prognostic tests. I think that's a key takeaway here.
Another
We want to take tests
another takeaway.
before any disease onset.
Yes.
Exactly. So Jeff, just one other follow up on that same thought process is, once you understand the some subset of the 7 factors that are impacting a person's life and health, the interventions that you get into for those areas, are those again looking at the individual markers, or are they looking at things sort of more holistically across all of them, in different combinations?
Yeah, I think it's a topology.
Hmm.
It's, the landscape of health is a irregular surface, if I can use a geographical kind of analogy.
Mhm.
So if we run our hand over the topology of health, it's going to be very interested. Some things are high, some things are low, and they can vary depending on the inputs, because our body is constantly exposed to signals, and we are primed as an organism to respond to those signals, which becomes our physiological control system.
Mhm.
If those signals that we're taking in are one of alarm, our body is extraordinary ability to protect against the ultimate thing, which is death. It will do anything to protect against death. It'll give away so many functions in order to protect us against death.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
So that's the end point. That's like when you're in the acute care setting of a hospital, and there's only a couple of biomarkers that are still preserved. Your electrolytes are out of whack, your glucose is out of whack, your proteins are out of whack, everything. And so you're just held together by one wire. And if that becomes jeopardized, then you lose the battle to entropy. Entropy takes over and you die. So the key is to maintain this metabolic redundancy, the ability to have multiple paths of execution, which then has to do with fitness and resilience. And that then comes back to all these various channels of this topology of how our body has multiple ways of navigating, because maybe tomorrow a ketogenic diet is the best way to navigate. But maybe most days it's a Mediterranean diet based
Right.
upon the signals the body is getting.
I have a quick question. How many grams of vitamin C do you take per day?
I'm 1,000 milligram guy.
Oh,
I,
okay, same here. So you're not following Linus's recommendation for 10 grams per day.
no, I'm not, as much as I love him and believe in the ascorbic acid model, I'm not the 10 gram per day. I used to be actually in my younger years, but I've
Oh, really?
decided, yeah, because I think you end up getting a lot of drive of dehydroascorbate, which
Yep.
is probably not so good. You want a
Yep.
proper balance between the two.
Agreed. Okay, I'll stop with my questions. Guru, go ahead. Let's.
Well, I have another very relevant topic I wanted to cover before we let you go, Jeff, and that is the AI topic.
Ooh.
And I was actually pretty fascinated to hear that you recently launched some kind of an AI clone of yourself that was trained with all of your life's work or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'd love to hear from you. And also, most importantly, I was wondering what are the applications you were envisioning for that? Is it just education, or are you actually thinking of providing care?
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm not thinking of providing care. I'm not a doctor that really is licensed to do therapeutics, but I'd like to think of myself as an information modulator, information source, a provocateur, so to speak.
Mm.
And so this was a big decision that I made in consultation with my family. My family was not so much in support of Jeff Bland being cloned, intellectually cloned. Um, but I felt that I had this body of work that went back now nearly 50 years that had a legacy value that would never be available if we didn't find some tool, some repository. And probably neither of you know, but I've been told that I was the first podcaster. I didn't know that. But I started a journal club, an electronic journal club that I did every month for 32 years. I never missed a month,
Hmm.
starting in the late 70s. I had several tens of thousands of subscribers. We started off on celluloid tapes, and then we went to CDs, and then we went to sticks, and then we went virtual. And I interviewed every month. I would have an interview with what I called a functional medicine leader of the month. And then I would review their work, and then we would talk about ancillary topics. So I did that for 32 straight years,
Wow.
monthly. So
Impressive.
that's 32 times 12 issues.
Wow.
And believe it or not, for 28 of those years, I had a woman working with me, Trish Uri, who is so diligent that before the technology we have today, she transcribed all of those tapes.
My goodness.
She made them digital.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I think back to where this started, starting with cassette tapes and to today, she's still working with me.
Huh.
So when we started talking about this, I said, well, many of the people that I interviewed are deceased now. And they were some of the fundamental people, Linus Pauling being one, Abram Hoffer being one. I mean, I could go down the list. So many of these people were the founding members of our community.
Uh-huh.
And I thought this will all get lost if we don't have some way of codifying it. So I made the decision against my family's recommendation of putting together a Jeff Bland clone that took all this digital work, everything I've ever written or talked about that is in digital form, and putting it together. And I have to say now, when my family reviews it, as maybe still apprehensive they are as to how it might be misused, they can't help but be impressed with the quality, because the voice simulation of me
Uh-huh.
and the quality of the way that it puts the ideas together is scary. I mean,
Wow.
it remembers better than I do. It
Wow.
remembers all these things that when I hear myself say that, I say, oh yes, I do remember that. That's right.
So Jeff, I have to just make a small observation there. I tried to take my dad's work. My dad passed away just about 6 months ago, but he's had a prolific career with a lot of writings. I think he's written like 25 or 30 books, and he was a justice of the High Court of Karnataka in India and so forth. So
Wow.
he's got all these
Wow.
judgments and everything. He's got his entire thing. And I wanted to take all of those things and turn that into exactly what you just did.
Uh-huh.
However, I ran into a problem, which you probably did not run into, which is that my language, Kannada, is not spoken very well right now
Oh,
with an
yeah.
AI. So I tried so many different tools in the last few
Oh,
years,
gee whiz.
and we're not there yet, but we will get there soon enough, I
Yeah.
hope. And then I can take all of his work, which is in a completely different language, not English, and turn that into a clone of my dad, which my family, by the way, does not like, but I think I'm going to do it anyway. So I completely identify with what you're saying. But I want to know, where do you? So is this an educational tool at the end of the day?
It's available on my website, jeffleblanc.com. It's also available in Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute. Ask Dr. Bland. And so I don't do any diagnosing and prescribing. But if you want information, I give citations. I can cite all the journal articles that I've read over the last
maybe
40
we should
years.
get your clone as a guest on our pod one day.
It's pretty funny because at our last meeting for the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute, the director of the institute, Nicole Fox, did a very cute thing. She got me up on stage at the beginning of the meeting. She says, "So Jeff, so we're going to have this meeting. It's going to be on the following topic. And I just wonder what you think about this meeting." So I thought she was going to have me do a narrative. But no, she asked my clone.
Oh,
So
wow.
my clone then spoke to the audience about, well, this meeting, I think, should be the following, and it should go, and it was hilarious. Everyone got a big, by the way, it was very good. It said better than I could have said what this meeting was going to be
That
about.
is crazy.
Amazing. I'm really happy that you've done this, by the way, and I will definitely check that out and also recommend it for other people who want to hear about all the stuff that's happened in that. I mean, I didn't know that it was for the last 28 years, including with Linus Pauling, everyone else. Beautiful. We
Amazing.
definitely love that. So from my side, Momo, I have one last question, and then I'll leave you to ask you your last question.
I think we have plenty of topics to discuss on another episode, so I think we should wrap this one up.
Yeah, maybe we should. Yes, we should. With this final question, I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
Which is, you said that you would ask your patients, what if you had a magic wand, what are your 3 wishes? So I want to ask you this question. If you had a magic wand, what would you want to do? Three wishes for what you would want to do with functional medicine.
Well, I think my wish number one is that I would be able to have people of your background, intelligence, and level of inquiry increasingly engaged in this concept. And I think that's how you...
Wish granted.
Well, thank you. When I think back to Linus Pauling, of how he got 60,000 scientists to sign this document with Schweitzer and Einstein, the contribution that made to humanity was significant. So how can this idea, I call it a virus that gets in your nervous system. I always tell people, be cautious now as you're being introduced to functional medicine, because once it's in there, you can't get away from it.
Yep.
And so that would be my first magic wand wish, to infect people with this concept to see if it sticks. Number 2 would be to make sure that the formalism and the scientific underpinning of functional medicine was secure enough that it would be able to be scrutinized by individuals who had an open mind. There are some people that no matter what you do, they will never be interested.
Right.
But for people with open minds, I would like it to be able to fulfill the criteria of serious proof of concept. And then number 3, I'd like ultimately this to, in whatever form, it doesn't have to be called functional medicine, to slip into the healthcare system so that people can be reimbursed for services that are delivering prospective care, not just on terminal disease.
Yep.
Amazing,
or make them
amazing.
inexpensive enough to where money is the cost is basically not
Exactly.
Not a
That's not
problem.
the barrier. Yes.
right.
So Jeff, on your second wish, maybe just a follow up is, if we have good scientific evidence, like for example, in Viome, we generate a lot of scientific evidence for various things. What would you recommend to be a great forum, maybe a set of journals or whatever it is, to expose those so that the functional medicine community can evaluate it and hopefully pursue it.
Well, in this kind of attention disorder society in which we're now living, that's all kind of driven by the idea of the moment, it would seem that that we need to find a way to attach these ideas to what do I want to say? I don't want to call it glamour, but to produce a buzz.
Mm.
We want it to be an authentic buzz. We want it to rival the excitement that people have when they hear about this new melanoma treatment technology that just has come out that,
Yep.
is really remarkable. And there's no question it's extraordinary. But if you look at the number of people that affects, it's far smaller than if we were to produce the same kind of buzz around prospective healthcare.
Agreed.
So how do we do that? How do we get that kind of excitement, energy into transforming health, not just treating terminal disease?
Agreed. I think with
Agreed.
that, we should probably call this particular episode an end. And
Yep.
we have a long list of other questions that we would love to talk to you about. But it's great. It's really great talking to you, Jeff, and hope to see you back here in the not too distant future.
Yes.
Well, I want to just commend both of you. I think that this activity you're engaged in here is extraordinarily important. Society rises and falls on ideas and the communication of those ideas. And your idea mongers. You are promoting ideas that make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you.
We're loving it. Thank you for being a wonderful guest, and we'll talk soon. Have a good
We
day.
look forward to it. Thanks so much. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jeff Bland, Dr. Jeff Bland. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours with him, and we'll bring him back. Right?
We'll definitely bring him back. I'm particularly excited about presenting to people many different examples of how functional medicine works in practice, but also as a scientist to go down deeper into molecular mechanisms and show, for example, how is it that a specific molecule made by gut microbiome can travel to the central nervous system and stimulate neuroregeneration, right?
Yeah.
Such things are not known to conventional medicine, and no one's going to be paying attention to your gut microbiome in conventional medicine. And these are the things that you can, as a person, actually learn about and take the right probiotics and right prebiotics and actually help yourself.
Absolutely. So yes, lots more to discuss on this topic, and we'll have more episodes on this, I'm sure. Let's move on to the next segment of our show today, which is in the news, right? I'm sure a lot of people have seen in the news that there's a lot of talk about cancer vaccines. It turns out that Moderna had some success with their cancer vaccine, and that's now in the news, in all the news outlets. So, Momo, I think we should talk about it both from the perspective of, what difference will it make? But first, let's talk about the molecular mechanism that's going on. So, can you explain to us briefly, please?
Yeah. Well, so I just want to give a bit of context that I've been super excited about this approach for more than a decade. And in fact, Viome has a pending patent application that describes this same approach, but for anti-aging. So what if you can have an anti-aging vaccine? And this is kind of a similar thing. So first of all, vaccine is now sort of a bad term for many people. So maybe we shouldn't even consider this to be a vaccine. It's like a training tool for your immune system. So let's talk about how this works. So naturally, the way that cancer is actually defended against is something called immune surveillance. So we have cells in our body, immune cells called T cells, and these T cells literally patrol the entire body. And when they find a cell that's not normal, they kill it. That's literally how it works. It's called immune surveillance. However, the reason that cancer comes around is because it is able to evade those cells in many different ways. And that's literally we could spend hours in ways that it can evade. But what this Moderna's program does is two things. First, it sequences the cancer cells in that person, keyword in that person, because every cancer is different. So in this person, they sequence the cancer and identify what is different between the cells, the cancer cells, and the normal cells. What is the difference? And then they create those differences and basically present those differences in the form of an mRNA vaccine, but it's actually just mRNA, to the immune system of the person. So they train the immune system and say, hey, these are new things that are presented in your body that you didn't know about or you couldn't see. Now here it is. I'm telling you clearly, here are the differences. Go find them and go kill them. So you're basically training soldiers to go kill cancer. It's a phenomenal approach that is highly personalized, which is important, and it's highly effective because you're basically unblinding the immune system. So I think we should definitely at some point in time have a bit more about this, especially when our patent is awarded, to talk about the mechanism in pictures, how this works.
Makes sense, Momo. Thank you for explaining that. And stepping back, right? Melanoma is the specific type of cancer that they targeted in this particular experiment in the news, and it turns out that a lot of people with melanoma, especially with higher stage melanomas, like stage 3 and stage 4 melanoma, a lot of people have a recurrence risk for melanoma. So, for example, a stage 3 person has approximately 50% chance of recurrence of the cancer, even after they go through the first round of therapy. And if they take a standard drug in the market, which is Keytruda, they can reduce that recurrence risk by about 50%. Now, it turns out this particular cancer, let's call it an intervention, vaccine, whatever you want to call it, this particular method reduces the risk by an additional 50%. So the risk of you getting a recurrence of melanoma becomes very, very small, given all the methods that the pharma companies have developed in the last several years. So if you have melanoma, please take advantage of this. It's very, very important. And Momo, do you have a sense of what the cost of these kinds of vaccines could be? Is it very high?
Well, no, I mean, the manufacturing of the vaccine will be very low, but the manufacturing cost has nothing to do with the market cost, right?
Of course.
So, I mean, we know now with GLP-1s and Keytruda, for example, Keytruda is one of the most expensive drugs ever, and it's the most profitable drug. To make it costs very little. But of course, the pharmaceutical companies are going to market or price their products what the market will bear. So it'll really depend on what the market will bear. But I think as more and more companies develop this, just like what we've seen with GLP-1 drugs, GLP-1 drugs just went down by 75% in cost in the last year. I think that over time, this will become more and more affordable to everyone because the actual process of detecting these lesions and then manufacturing this mRNA training tool is actually not a lot of money.
Got it. Okay, moving on to the next topic, the Viome Monthly Challenge. Last time we had an announcement of the winner of the monthly challenge. For the last time, we're going to continue the same monthly challenge this month as well, which is that everyone is encouraged to go down below this video, if you're watching a video, to provide your comments and questions. And Momo and I will look at all the comments and questions, and we will pick one that is very insightful, very educational, really good questions and comments. We pick one of those and we award the monthly challenge award, which is a free full body intelligence from Viome, which is the leading test in the market right now. And you will get all the benefits of all the insights and the recommendations that you get from that test.
Yeah. Awesome. And then what's in the next episode? So we are going to have a very special guest in the next episode. This is Dr. Ed Zuckerberg. He's spent 40 years educating dentists and dental community about the importance of oral health in systemic health. And that's what the focus is going to be. So definitely tune in because oral health is not just limited to the mouth. Oral health has deep impacts on systemic health and very serious diseases such as cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, and several others. So we're going to dive deeper into those topics. So
exciting topic and look forward to that.
Yeah. That's all we have for today. I'm Momo, a biochemist.
And I'm Guru, an AI scientist.
We're two PhDs on a pod.
Yes. See you next time, Momo. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Two PhDs on a Pod is a Viome Health Science podcast production. Written and hosted by Viome CTO Guru Banavar and Viome CSO Momo Vuyisich. Produced and edited by Lisa Shomo. Podcast art by Kevin Wu. If you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe for new episodes every other week. We'll see you next time.